Art is the reshaping of reality by man to present it in an understandable way. As the artist recreates the world around him, it is shaped by how he sees it and what he believes in. The Indian artist did not attempt to depict only the material reality around him. He wished to share the complete experience of the moment, not just the photographic presentation of the shapes around him. Beauty for the Indian artist has been a reflection of the glory of God. In fact, for the ancient artist, the experience of beauty, the ecstasy on seeing nature or art which is truly beautiful, has been considered as akin to Brahmanand or the final bliss. Join us on this journey into the heart of the Indian tradition of painting. Come with us to the gorge of the Vaghora river, where Ajanta was created, to the courts of the Mughals and the Deccani Sultans. Journey with us through the deserts of Rajasthan and the icy lands of Ladakh and Lahore Spiti. In the verdant south and in the gentle hills of the north, experience the compassionate view of life that is enshrined in Indian painting.
In the 1940s in India, there was an excitement in the air. The people's movement and struggle to gain independence from foreign rule had gained momentum, and freedom was not very far away. The Bengal school had risen at the turn of the century, led by artists like Abanindranath Tagore. The work of these artists represented a harking back and a deep nostalgia for the great art of ancient and medieval India. They rejected the Western academic style of painting, which till then had been the norm in India in the early 20th century. In the 1930s, Amrita Shergill represented an attempt to synthesize the Western vision in art and the Indian spirit. The Second World War was over. Winds had begun to blow in from Europe and America, where existing philosophies and ideas in art were being dismantled. New norms were being created as artists struggled to come to terms with the chaos around them. New ways of looking at the world and new manners of expression were coming into being. The people of India were beginning to see themselves as a nation with a proud and long history. Indian artists were also groping and rediscovering their roots in the soil of their ancient traditions. Traditions which had been severed over a period of 200 years.
So in a sense, there was a social contract among patrons, artists and viewers. And this social contract of understanding, if you like, has broken down. And I think that it's the consequences of this breakdown that really inform Indian art from 1947 to the present.
In the 1940s, there emerged a group of artists in Bombay who wished to create a new modern Indian identity. One that was based neither on a sentimental looking back to the past, as the Bengal school had done, nor on the following of Western traditions. Artists in India became conscious of the vast new vistas which were being explored in the modern world. The academic style of painting, which had been taught in the art schools in Indian cities, and the reaction against this of the Bengal revivalists no longer satisfied the creative urges of Indian painters. They wished to express themselves in a way that was individual, independent and truly modern, yet deeply rooted in the long traditions of their own past.
The progressive artist group was established, which has been given a lot of attention and critical acclaim. And the 6 founding members, there were 3 founding members, and each of them brought one friend. Souza brought Hussain, Raza brought Gade, and Ara brought Bakre. And the 6 of them essentially sort of tried to break out from the established orthodoxies prevailing in Bombay at the time.
It started with the independence and the freedom movement. There was a completely new world. As Raza had said, when he was talking about that period of 47, 48 and the founding of the Bombay Progressives, he talked about the fact, he put it, we could move mountains. We were in the process of becoming ourselves.
Both the Calcutta Group 43 and the progressive artists are important because they ushered in modernism. This is around the 40s when international modernism itself was being mediated to them through the emigres, the war emigres, and then there were books and prints that were coming into the country, as well as their own encounters with artists in the West. So they were being exposed to international modernism, and on the other hand, because this was a period of gaining independence slowly, they were beginning to reinvent their past, by which they had to understand and delve into the historical and cultural past and make sense out of it in the present period.
In 1948, M.F. Hussain and Souza visited an exhibition of Indian works at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in Delhi. It was a turning point for Hussain. He says, I saw all the Indian works and then felt that I should paint something else. After visiting the exhibition, I combined 3 periods: the form of the Gupta period, the strong colors of the Basoli period, and the innocence of folk art. Hussain's paintings are truly and deeply rooted in his cultural traditions. His work is a fine synthesis of his understanding of both the Indian and Western idioms.
Hussain, obviously a legend, a man who has an energy which is unmatched by most artists, and his style becomes something which is easily recognizable by anyone, and that's the hallmark always of a great artist. Raza, Gade, both brilliant colorists. Raza sustaining the journey far deeper, evolving different idioms, different styles over the last 40 years. Bakre probably got the least attention out of the 6. Ara, a self-taught artist. So each of them represented different styles, different ways by which they imbibe the Indian traditional art. They expose themselves and share the Western academic schools, especially the influence of Paris.
And their importance, as we know, lay precisely in being able to put together a medley of cultures and events and form a cohesive modern idiom, which was to influence Indian art in the decades to come. Hussain needs no introduction, of course, but as much as one admires his vitality, his energy, his capacity to invent and reinvent art, he would be important also because he was thinking historically about art. He was thinking about the direction it had to take, the way in which it could become Indian as well as international. And in those early years, in the 40s and early 50s, he was making some of his most significant paintings.
Francis Newton Sousa, who was a student at the J.J. School of Arts in Bombay, was born in Goa. He was intensely idealistic and was expelled from art school in 1945 for demonstrating against the British government.
And Sousa, who wrote the manifesto for the progressives, actually mentions there is no way of making an aged art young again. It must be born anew and grow up from infancy as a new thing, working out its own salvation from effort in all fear and trembling.
Sousa's works are striking, and they raise questions that force you to introspect. Through his paintings and his writing, Sousa unrelentingly reveals the hypocrisy and confusion of contemporary society.
And he has very strong views, and he reflects a condition, a human condition, very clearly in his work. Human condition reflected through another individual. Even a house has a character there, and so much also is visible that his own upbringing in the, well, he was born in Goa, and very closely related with going to a church with his mother.
I think the traditional conception of beauty has had a great deal to do with the imperative of harmony, of the bringing about of harmony between, or accord between between the viewer, what is perceived, and the essence of that experience. And somehow with the onset of modernity, it appears that the possibilities of harmony become diminished in some way, so that what the art experience would aim at is not necessarily the savoring of beauty, but possibly the recognition of terror. So rather than the beautiful, I think the states of being that come into play now are much more those of the grotesque. And a great deal of contemporary Indian art is really addressed towards these states. And I can't help but think that this is one of the inevitable outcomes of what you might call the experience of modernity, which is one of fragmentation, of alienation, and of the general breakdown of what traditionally would be seen as harmonic systems of being.
Today, all over the world and in India, there are a lot of tension. Today, there is a lot of not only disparity, but there are a lot of turmoil, lot of friction, lack of grace, and the innocence is lost in the world today.
I think that in certain periods there is almost no option for art but to take on the horror of reality and to address it. And this cannot be addressed unless art goes through the process of representing the horror and then dealing with it in some way.
While Sousa's works are a strong statement on the hypocrisy of a soulless society, other painters like S.H. Raza searched for stillness in the midst of the turbulence. In 1948, Raza passed out from the J.J. School of Arts and 2 years later, he left for France to study at the famed École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Since then, he has continued to live and work in France.
After 25 years of work, I was not satisfied. I looked at my own paintings and I told myself, Raza, you are not there. This is French contemporary art. There are hundreds of painters doing this. And I went into introspect. Serious thinking was necessary. It was an inner journey, which meant that instead of European concepts, I started to study what was Oriental art, what was Indian art, which revealed to me as a colossal civilization.
Then the next major kind of institutional event, which then led to a major art school, was in Baroda, the setting up of the MS University in Baroda, which brought together 3-4 of the finest artistic minds, from N.S. Bende to K.G. Subramaniam to Shankar Chaudhary, along with the pioneers of the university, Hansa Mehta and Markand Bhatt. And the Baroda school became a very important influence in the whole development of modern Indian art.
Baroda visualized a new artist, that is an artist who is not only studio bound, but an artist who is let us say, a kind of a modern new citizen of India, of a free nation. And hence the pioneers of the school decided that besides the studio training, that's of painting, sculpture, printmaking, etc., they would also get a good grounding in art history, in languages, in aesthetics, etc. And hence it is a very different kind of artist that they visualized.
At the same time, there were corners or pockets within India who were reacting against now all Western influence. And the Chola Mandal group is one prime example, which by the mid-60s had tried to institutionalize or come to terms with a new sense of identity for the Indian artists, and thereafter for India as a country on a larger level. This link between the artists finding their own originality and finding their own Indianness was always a dominant theme, which was to a large extent linked to India finding herself also as a nation after independence.
They used to discuss these problems at that time when this is in the 60s. They used to discuss the double destiny of the Indian writer or poet or artist, etc. So they used to say that you have a tradition which is, thousands of years old, which you cannot deny at any rate. You can't deny it. But you are living in a world which is modern, and you have all these influences coming from all over. So you have to undergo a kind of synthesis to find a thing, your own. And then we used to say that if very young and very aggressive in certain ways, used to say that if there is anything Indian, it will be there, because you cannot wipe out your accent. Wherever you come from, you carry that thing with you.
I would say in the context of contemporary Indian painting, something very simple but important, that let's now that we have come to maturity in contemporary art expression, in painting at least, let's stop looking at the West. We should look at our own sources. We should look within us and try to give and project an artist's expression which may have nothing to do with the world trends. Believe me, 20 years back when I discovered Bindu and the potentials in the seed, the energy, the Shakti that it revealed. It has changed my work, it has changed my life. Since then, I believe since 82, my work have a different sense, a different meaning, a different quality. But everything was contained in a seed, in a small thing.
The ancient Indian treatise on painting, the Chitra Sutra of the Vishnu Dharmotra Puran, says that paintings are amongst the most valuable treasures of mankind. It states that paintings, which are made with an understanding of the harmony of the whole of creation, are extremely beneficial to the viewer.
What the ancient or medieval Indian artist would have done is to affirm a life-giving worldview that was shared by society at large. But since we've lost that life-giving worldview, since we don't have that coherent image of society in the cosmos, the artist's role changes completely from an affirmative one to a critical one. But in a way, what the artist is doing is still the same thing, which is to remind people of their own creativity, their own freedom, their own dignity.
If one is to give a serious difference between the art of the past and the modern contemporary art, obviously it is in the nature of this joy and the role of this joy in the creative process.
Images of the past hold out a very different kind of promise. I think what they stand for is a hope in, if you like, the self-balancing properties of the universe or of society. But when you live in a society that now no longer has this kind of image of coherence, then it's very difficult for art that is produced in that society to offer such images.
The artist today searches for a universal expression, one which would be understood across the boundaries of nations and cultures.
So universal is the external observer who is seeing in them. So people talk about universal language, art has a universal language. But then, as far as the practitioner goes, there is no universal language, it's a personal language. There are some people who are sold out to this idea, well, we are one world kind of a thing. There might be people like me who belong to smaller units of place.
Traditions bring to us the distilled knowledge of the finest minds of the past. Roots in one's local soil help us to understand ourselves and our own culture. It is from this understanding that the artist can hope to have a meaningful expression which is relevant for mankind.
Essentially, all creative expression is about the human mind, human soul, heart, whatever one wants to call it, trying to understand oneself, and in that process of understanding oneself, sustaining that journey, and in the process of sustaining that journey, finding all the necessary forms of expression, and genuinely, without compromise, essentially it's about not compromising, and expressing something which reflects that genuine search. It's a continual search.
But then every kind of art, from where it emerges, I mean, it's like a plant which starts from the soil and it grows towards the sky. It is trying to exceed itself. That way, every kind of art comes to a point when, of course, it exceeds itself and it puts forth something that is a little beyond the root connections it has. That is true with all literature. That is why art and literature from all over the world are reacted to people from other parts of the world quite readily. There cannot be no art worth the name unless these root connections are intact.
Tradition to me are like our roots, which stay but which also flower with every kind of a shoot, an offshoot that germinates out of the larger whole. And it depends upon individual perceptive capabilities and inner convictions that you can make these shoots sprout in different directions. So it needn't be that the understanding of tradition is about only replicating what tradition has tried to present itself as, but they can be like takeoff points, which give you an access to another genre of the flight of your imagination.
I thought the artist is a man who attributes his own, heart and soul into an object. So the entire process of work of art is actually you first stand on a plane of reality and then you take a step into unknown.
Painting, like any creative form, is a universal expression of one's understanding of one's life, one's obligation to oneself. To say, create something great, create something which will not just serve your own personal journey, but will make the lives of every Indian more fulfilling, whether it's aesthetically or materially. So unless that collective energy is added to that individual will, you will never create something which changes mindsets, attitudes.
The practice of art is an extension of your way of seeing or your way of visualizing things. So that is compulsive, that comes from within you. It is something that you cannot live without.
The message of my work is my life, because I paint, so I live, I exist.